Confidence becomes dangerous when it stops being self-expression and starts becoming survival behavior. Because there's a difference between feeling confident and feeling unsafe without performing it. A lot of transgender people understand that difference intimately, not theoretically, physically, emotionally, neurologically. The body learns quickly when hesitation becomes socially punishable, when uncertainty attracts scrutiny, when softness attracts interrogation, when simply existing publicly can turn into emotional exposure. That changes people, quietly, over time, especially in a world obsessed with visibility, because modern culture constantly says, be yourself. But what it actually rewards is emotionally manageable identity, confidence that feels convenient, authenticity that doesn't disturb anyone, vulnerability that remains aesthetically controlled. And transgender people learn this contradiction earlier than most. They learn that confidence often determines whether people perceive them as human or debatable. So eventually confidence stops feeling optional. It becomes protective, a social defense system, a psychological shield against humiliation before humiliation even arrives. That's why many transgender people become emotionally hyper-aware in public spaces. Not dramatic, aware. Scanning tone, scanning reactions, scanning body language, scanning danger. Because emotional safety rarely feels guaranteed, even in supposedly supportive environments. Especially there, conditional acceptance creates a unique kind of psychological instability. People support you until your existence becomes emotionally inconvenient for them, until complexity appears, until discomfort enters the conversation. Until your identity stops feeling inspirational and starts feeling real. That's when many transgender people learn something devastating. Visibility is not the same as understanding, and acceptance is not always safety. The internet made this worse, massively, because social media rewards visible identity performance, while emotionally flattening actual human complexity. Algorithms love clarity. Human beings are not clear. Algorithms reward confidence. But many transgender people are surviving emotional hypervigilance disguised as confidence. That's the terrifying part. People often admire survival mechanisms without recognizing them as trauma responses. The composure, the humor, the self-awareness, the sharp emotional intelligence, the unbothered energy. Sometimes that's not confidence. Sometimes that's years of psychological adaptation. Years of learning how to appear emotionally unaffected while internally calculating risk every few seconds. Risk of rejection, risk of humiliation, risk of violence, risk of misunderstanding. Risk of becoming emotionally dissected by strangers again. And after enough experiences like that, the nervous system changes. Permanently. Some transgender people become socially brilliant because survival forced them to study people obsessively. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, behavioral inconsistencies, social discomfort, judgment patterns. The body starts predicting danger before the conscious mind catches up. That's not paranoia. That's conditioning. Because rejection trauma teaches emotional anticipation. And emotional anticipation slowly becomes identity. You start preparing emotionally before entering rooms, editing yourself before speaking, monitoring your own reactions while reacting, softening parts of your personality automatically. Not because you're fake. Because unpredictability stopped feeling safe. That's the hidden exhaustion nobody talks about enough. The constant internal management. The nonstop emotional self-surveillance. The feeling that your existence must remain emotionally optimized for public consumption. Especially online. Modern identity culture turned people into emotional brands. Everything becomes presentation. Presentation becomes survival. And survival becomes performance. Eventually some transgender people stop asking, "Who am I becoming?" and start asking, "What version of me creates the least resistance socially?" That question destroys people slowly, because emotional optimization creates fragmentation. You split into versions. One version feels emotions. The other manages perception. One version wants intimacy. The other monitors danger. One version wants softness. The other performs resilience because softness stopped feeling safe years ago. That contradiction exhausts people internally, especially when the outside world keeps rewarding the performance. People praise resilience constantly. But resilience can become emotional imprisonment when collapse never feels permitted. Some transgender people become so good at appearing emotionally strong, they accidentally lose access to emotional rest. And emotional rest is different from validation. Validation stimulates. Safety relaxes. A lot of transgender people receive attention, while remaining psychologically unsafe for years. That changes attachment behavior. Quietly, you start fearing emotional replaceability. You start overanalyzing distance. You start monitoring energy shifts obsessively. Delayed responses feel emotionally loaded. Changes in tone feel threatening. Because when identity itself has repeatedly felt socially unstable, relationships start feeling unstable too, especially modern relationships. Dating apps intensified this psychological instability dramatically. People now experience each other through rapid emotional filtering. Swipe culture rewards immediate readability, immediate confidence, immediate certainty. But transgender identity often exists beyond simplistic emotional categories. It's layered, fluid, complex, human. Modern dating culture punishes complexity through impatience. People want emotional intimacy without emotional unpredictability. They want authenticity without emotional labor. They want vulnerability without discomfort. And transgender people feel this contradiction constantly, especially those exhausted from performing emotional confidence publicly all day. That exhaustion creates strange coping mechanisms. Some become emotionally detached. Some become hyper-independent. Some become socially magnetic while privately isolated. Some become intensely self-aware while emotionally disconnected from themselves. Because chronic performance creates depersonalization eventually. You begin watching yourself exist, instead of fully inhabiting yourself naturally, especially after years of monitoring how others interpret your existence. Interpretation fatigue is real and devastating, because being constantly interpreted is psychologically different from being understood. Interpretation analyzes. Understanding relaxes. Many transgender people rarely feel relaxed socially. Not fully. Even supportive spaces can feel emotionally conditional. Because support often disappears the moment someone becomes emotionally inconvenient. That creates emotional presuspicion. A subconscious expectation that misunderstanding is always nearby. So confidence becomes preventative. Controlled posture. Controlled emotion. controlled vulnerability, controlled reactions, controlled visibility. Everything becomes managed, strategic, calculated, not manipulatively, defensively. There's a difference. And eventually, the performance becomes so normalized, even the person performing it forgets where the armor ends. That's when emotional numbness starts appearing. Not because someone stopped feeling, because feeling became too operationalized, too monitored, too exposed, too exhausting. Some transgender people become addicted to appearing okay because emotional collapse feels socially dangerous, especially after years of defending their identity publicly. Strength becomes compulsory, and compulsory strength destroys softness internally. That's why loneliness inside the transgender experience can feel uniquely psychological. Not just social loneliness. Interpretive loneliness. The feeling that people can see you constantly, without emotionally understanding the cost of surviving as you. And surviving is exhausting when existence itself keeps becoming public discussion material. Eventually, some transgender people stop wanting admiration entirely. They stop wanting visibility. They stop wanting validation. They just want emotional neutrality. A space where the nervous system finally stops preparing for impact. A space where identity stops feeling performative. A space where confidence no longer feels required for basic emotional survival. Because underneath all the composure, all the sharp self-awareness, all the resilience, all the socially perfected confidence, there's often a person who became exhausted from turning survival into personality. And the most painful part? A lot of people will only ever see the performance, not the exhaustion underneath it.